9.5 is mean absolute deviation. This is our last measure of variation that you're going to learn. So here we go. All right, so another measure of variation is the mean absolute deviation. It is an average of how much data values differ from the mean. So our key idea is finding the mean absolute deviation, and there's steps to take. So step 1, find the mean of the data. Step 2, find the distance between each data value and the mean. And step 3, find the sum of the distances in step 2. And then step 4, divide the sum in step 3 by the total number of data values. Obviously this is a lot. You don't really know what you're doing exactly. However, you'll need these steps as you try to find the mean absolute deviation. In mean absolute deviation, we also refer to it as MAD in math. Finding the mean absolute deviation. So you record the number of raisins in 8 scoops of cereal. So we're going to find and interpret the MAD of the MAD of the data. So this is how we do it. We're going to start with the actual data they give us as 1. So these are all the scoops that this person did for the data, and how many raisins were in each scoop, I should say. Okay, so we'll start there. First step is, remember going back to step 1, it says find the mean. So let's do that. We take all of our data, we add it all together, and you should come up with 24. How many pieces of data are there? There's 8 data sets, so we have to divide that by 8. We come up with 3. So our mean is 3. So for step 2, we're going to start with a dot plot to organize the data. So it'll look like this. We'll put each of our amounts on there. So I have 1, 3 2s, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, that's kind of sloppy. I have 3 4s, and then I have a 5. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace each dot with a distance from the mean. So if our mean was 3, I'm going to replace it with what my actual distance is, and I'll show you as I make the new dot plot. Okay, so I just made another number line from 0 to 5. So I'm going to look over here. 3 is my mean, okay? So if 3 is my mean, I want to know how many units are all my data from the actual mean. So how many units? So I'm going to look here. I've got 1 unit is where 2 is. And how many of those do I have? I've got 3 of them. So I'm replacing them with digits. The digit right here, this is where it gets a little confusing. This digit right here represents 1 unit from the mean. That's all it means. Okay. Let's look at how many digits is 1 from there. I got 1, 2. So it's 2 units from 3. How many of those do I have? Just 1. The reason I wrote a 2 right here is because it's 2 units from my mean, and my mean is the 3, right? Okay. Let's look at my 4s. How many units is 4 away from my mean? It's 1 whole unit, and there's 3 of them that I had, so I add in 1 unit, but I put the number 1. And then what about 5? I've got 1, 2 units from my mean, and there's only 1 5, so I put a 2 in there. Little bit confusing, but each data value, you recognize how many units it is away from the mean. That's all you're doing, and that's all that these numbers right here are representing, is how many digits they're away. And the reason I have 3 of them, well, it's because I have 3 pieces of data from there. Okay. Then step 3 is the sum of the distances. So we're going to take all the sums of the distances and we're going to add them up. So it'll look like this. So I take 2, that's where I got my 2, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. These are just distances we're talking about. Plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. Plus 2. So I add all those up, we get 10. Okay, so that was step 3, was we take the sum of all the distances. Step 4 is finding the mean absolute deviation. So we take our 10 that we found in number 3 and we divide it by how many data sets we had. And because we had 8 scoops of cereal, we divide it by 8. Now you're going to do this math. You're going to do out the long, drawn out thing, and it's going to end up being 1.25. And that would be my MAD, or my mean absolute deviation. To interpret something like this, I would say something along the lines of the data values differ from the mean by an average of 1.25. So remember, my mean up here is 3, and I'm comparing it to 1.25 raisins. On average is what I would actually get. All I really wanted to find here, or help you understand, is finding the MAD and really focusing on the fact that it's another type of measure of deviation. So, I'm sorry. Sorry about that again. But mean absolute deviation is another type of measure of variation that we could use. And it might not all make sense, but when you're finding data, you're finding a lot of different facts and information that you're putting into, looking at and interpreting. So this is right down the scientist field of, gathering data and interpreting it. And that's what you just did here. So that will be the end of 9.5.